So if free will was proven wrong tomorrow, nothing would change. People would just continue acting as though free will exists, except now they'll have the data to back it up, right?
They're making decisions that are low stakes, very, very low stakes. They're not making a decision of whom they're going to marry.
I believe that from the extrapolations of like these different experiments we've had, or even just like observations about biology, we can make the case that like all of these myths that we use to rule our lives are rooted in some kind of biological or environmental explanation.
The chimpanzees and the animals, they don't have the same degree of rational faculty. You might say the same type of free will or the same type of will as humans do, because they are completely subjected to their environment. That's why you cannot take an ape and stick him in Antarctica and expect him to live. However, humans, because we have this rational faculty, we're able to transcend.
Free will sits in a weird place. We feel it constantly, every decision, every choice. But the moment we try to explain it, it starts slipping. So tonight's question is that feeling something real or just something useful? We're going to start with elevator Steelmaning Caden. So you're going to pretend like you're smarter and better, and you also agree with his position.
Okay. So if I were to argue against the statement that free will is a helpful myth, like I said, I would either tackle the part where I say it's a myth or the part where I say it's helpful. So there's some good arguments for both. For the myth side, obviously there's a theistic argument to get out of the way. So many theists believe that God gifted humans with free will, and that we have the ability to choose between right and wrong. From the non-theistic argument, you could also make the case that argument is lacking in proof. So in order to confidently claim that free will is a myth, you would need to be able to map out all of human behavior and then understand the causal chains that led to that behavior. But no one knows that, obviously. So the position that I'm going to be defending is inherently relying on some incomplete data and some inference to fill the gaps. Beyond that, there's also the self-refutation side. So, it's kind of self-defeating to make the claim that human logical inference is flawed, and then use human logical inference to make the claim that free will is a myth. And finally, there's also the whole scope of human behavior that we can refer to, right? So our legal systems, our moral systems are all based in some way around this idea that people can choose and that they can be judged for their outcomes, for the outcomes that they choose. So if free will is a myth, then it seems a bit, oh, sorry. How am I doing on time?
10 seconds.
All right. On the helpful side, if you're a Kantian-style deontologist, then it can be a bit contradictory to claim that something is a myth and also helpful. And yeah, you could also attack the helpful side by saying that free will is generally underpinning a lot of feelings of guilt and shame and regret for a lot of people. So if anything, it could be an unpleasant myth rather than a helpful one. I think that's everything.
All right. I'm going to ask Caden, do you feel like that was a decent steel man of your position?
I think it's a steel man of the position in general. So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Now, Caden, you'll attempt to steel man elevator's position.
All right. Let's break apart the statement.
Before we start, I'm going to raise my hand whenever there's 10 seconds. I think I like
sounds
that.
good. Give me 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I'll raise my hand.
Okay.
Starting the timer in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Free will. That's a really, really difficult. I'll break the whole statement apart in 3 sections: free will, helpful, and myth. Free will, it can lead to an infinite regress really, really quickly. You can will what you will, but how do you choose what you will? And that's a huge question that I believe the determinist side has that more of the tabula rasa, blank slate view of human, both from the environment and nature, that is imposing and causing you to act in this specific way. And so that is a strong position, and they're able to record a lot of, with neuroscience, they're able to track before a person makes a conscious choice, whether they'll make that choice or not in lab settings, so that they can tell, like, oh, they're going to pick this before they're even aware they're going to pick it. And so that's an argument from, you might say, that we don't have free will. But is having free will helpful? Well, first let's go to myth first. So the myth and this idea of a delusion, is it a helpful delusion? Is typically what has been portrayed at in popular culture, in debates. It's helpful because it sustains life, even if what you're going to do is not, the bad behavior would be contrary to life, but having a helpful story that you participate in gets you through the hard times, helps you find meaning through suffering, helps you get through a difficult situation, helps you carry out the hard actions it will take to get through sometimes a seemingly absurd situation. So that is kind of my view on the counterposition, and I think it's really strong, like based on empirical evidence, that free will is a myth. So
Awesome. Elevator, how do you think that Steelman was?
Very good. Yeah, I mean, that covers a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about.
Great. We understand each other's positions.
Nice.
Let me find my script. Okay, let's move into the opening statements. You each have 5 minutes.
So, free will is a myth. I'm going to be defending that statement, and it is admittedly very dense. So first of all, just to get some assumptions and definitions out of the way, I'm only going to be focusing on humans. I'm assuming Occam's razor, so the most truthful explanation is the one that explains our observations the best while relying on the fewest assumptions. And in terms of the definition I'll be using the definition of libertarian free will. We can talk also about compatibilism later on. But yeah, so libertarian free will is broadly defined as the capacity of humans to make decisions independently of any prior event or state of the universe. So, based on this definition, in order for free will to exist, you need to believe that humans are able to make their decisions independently of influences like biology and environment. But I would argue that if you take away biology and environment, there is nothing left, right? It's biology and environment and maybe some stochasticity. So there's no credible way of justifying that free will exists if you remove these two elements, unless you're relying on some non-natural explanations. And that's fundamentally why I believe that free will, as I defined it, is a myth. And admittedly, it's very hard to grasp because the assumption of free will permeates pretty much everything we do. I suspect it stems from our psychology and maybe the way we evolved, because free will provides the reason behind action, which allows creatures, including humans, to survive and reproduce well. If you don't have this belief that actions can change your outcomes, then what's the point in doing anything, right? So the way I see it, even if free will doesn't exist, it seems almost hard-coded in human nature. It seems inevitable for survival. And more broadly, it just seems to permeate all of the systems that we've built, right? So the psychological phenomenon of internal loci of control, I'm sure we've all heard of it. Having an internal locus of control tends to be correlated with lower rates of depression, better life quality, yada, yada. And that kind of phenomenon kind of translates to all of our legal systems as well. In law, the whole reason that we think it's okay to punish people who do bad things is because we believe they've chosen to do those things. The feeling of fairness is actually very closely tied to this idea of choice, right? It's very hard to come up with a system that is both fair and doesn't assume free will to some extent. So that summarizes why I also believe free will is a helpful myth. What I mean by helpful is that it helps us from a biological perspective. It seems kind of inevitable that it crops up in order to ensure survival. And it's also a pragmatic necessity for building societies that feel fair and meet criteria like improving human happiness. I think that's pretty much everything.
We can go straight into Caden in his opening statement. You have 5 minutes. Just let me know when to hit start.
Go ahead and hit start. All right, so I'm also going to take free will, kind of from a libertarian stance as well, that we can act independent of a given environment that we're in. And I'm also going to take the perspective from the human. I'm not going to deal with animal creatures because we're concerned here with humans. And I'm arguing that free will is not a helpful myth. And what I'm kind of poking at here, kind of trying to explore, is that we actually can make choices that are independent of our determined environment. Of, you would say, Pearson Academy students will understand, it's the agent arena, the arena by which we are placed in. But we can only ever do that if we are acting rationally or we are thinking, because that is what differentiates man from animals, who are observably very behaviorally determined by their environment, based on stimulus and response. I want to define a term real quick, and I'm using a definition from Ayn Rand's book, What is Philosophy, Who Needs It? And she defines reason here. I'm going to build my argument from this. Let us define our terms. What is reason? Reason is the faculty which perceives, identifies, and integrates the material provided by man's senses. Reason integrates man's perceptions by means of forming abstractions or concepts, thus raising man's knowledge from the perceptual level, which he shares with the animals, to the conceptual level, which he alone can reach. The method which reason employs is this process is logic, and logic is the art of non-contradictory identification. So this idea of turning precepts, what you observe, into concepts, things you hold in your mind, is something unique to animals. And so my argument here with myth is the highest order of abstraction or conceptualization, and only man can grasp that. Now, the myth is helpful because when you can grasp a myth or a structure or a concept that is so abstract that those with lower order intelligence cannot grasp, you're able to allow it to dictate your life. Or you might say everyone is dictated by a myth, whether they are consciously aware of it or not. All humans are. But those who have the intellect, who can actually think and slow their thinking down, not be mindless, can actually observe the myth and choose to change it, to choose to change that myth, whether they're participating in a bad ideology that's going to bring about destruction, or they can choose to participate in a better myth, a more life-affirming myth. Myth, etymological root of myth, means sacred story. Of the gods, you might say, or the highest abstractions, the highest concepts. You're going to see God as not just this thing in the cloud that's archaic and just pushing buttons, but you think of God as the highest abstraction, and you can choose to participate in that. And that requires, and that's what makes man different, is we can choose this thing of will. We can actually slow our thinking down and say, no, I'm going to change the myth that is dictating my life. However, when man makes that choice, it typically requires that he override his causal environment, because typically, always, the environment is dictated by whatever is the common zeitgeist or the myth governing that given society. And so that hero, who believes in free will and he can actually make a change, has to overstep and overcome, and that's going to require sacrifice. It's going to require conviction. Not always easy. Best to go with the herd. So my argument, to make it succinct, is free will is what makes man man. Doesn't mean that there is no helpful myths, but free will is what we do when we when we slow down and think and use our rational faculties.
Let's go into our rebuttals straight away. So, Elevator, you have 3 minutes for your rebuttal to his opening statement. Let me know when to hit start.
So I wanted to tackle first the thing you were saying about how humans are distinct from animals in that they can choose what guidelines they live by. I would argue that this is difficult to prove. When you look at animals like chimpanzees or corvids, they seem to understand self-agency, at least to an extent. And they understand how to distinguish the things that are subject to their own agency and the agency of other animals. So chimpanzees can display empathy, or they can blame other chimps. And this seems to suggest that the understanding of free will is not necessarily unique to humans. It might even predate humans, or at least the mechanisms that led to humans developing what we term free will maybe were developed far before humans were even around. Then I wanted to tackle the thing you were saying about how what distinguishes humans and animals, let's assume that animals don't have free will, is that we can reason. We can use our morals and our values to guide our decisions. I would argue that our morals and our values and our reasoning is primed by biology and environment as well. It, again, just is biology and environment all the way down, with maybe some room for stochasticity. No one tangibly gets to choose their own morals and values. No one gets to choose their tolerance for certain kinds of discomfort or their potential. These things are kind of teed up for humans far before they're even conscious. I mean, they're outside of anyone's deliberate control. At the very least, this is what I believe our current evidence and our current understanding of biology and environment suggests. To break it down, in order to prove that this isn't the standard and that there is something other than biology and environment guiding our morals and our values, I believe you'd need to rely on some non-naturalistic explanation. I personally haven't found any naturalistic explanations for that like third-party influence, but yeah, interested to hear your thoughts.
I will go to Caden's rebuttal.
So my rebuttal to your, I agree that you made a few distinctions here, that you can't make a decision independent of, you might say, the environment by which you're placed in. And I think that's a very solid argument, because we have this idea of identity. Quite often, I think it's a mistaken misconception of what it means to be human, is that we think we are this autonomous, or we are this independent thing in our brain that's thinking, and that we don't have any causal connection to our environment, so to say, because we can think independently using logic. We can use this thing of logic and reason to step out of our environment in our head and think independently. And so now we kind of create this Descartes dualism, metaphysics. And I like how you bring that up, that you cannot remove, or I'm probably butchering your language here, but you cannot remove the individual from the environment by which they're placed, and their decisions are causally connected to that. And that's an Aristotelian argument too, that, what is good for man is going to be based on how he fits with his environment. Like, what's good for the lion is that the lion has claws, because that fits him into that niche. And so all his decisions are going to be coupled with that arena, that environment. But where my rebuttal would be, kind of to tease that out, based on what you just said earlier with your rebuttal to me, is that humans, the chimpanzees and the animals, they don't have the same degree of rational faculty. You might say the same type of free will, or the same type of will as humans do, because they are completely subjected to their environment. That's why you cannot take an ape and stick him in Antarctica and expect him to live. However, humans, because we have this rational faculty, we're able to transcend a current niche. We're able to actually move to Antarctica and train a bunch of dogs, kill all the mammoths, and build little teepees to keep us warm. Actually, we're so transcendent with our rational faculty that we could actually transcend the bounds of Earth too, and get us on the moon, hopefully to Mars. And that is a testament to this man's ability to make decisions that can be independent of the immediate environment by which he is placed. He's able to extend his horizon, both in spatially and temporally, to act in respects to larger transcendent environments that he is not immediately in connection with. So, yeah, I'm out of time, so stop there.
Great stuff. Let's go straight into the 10-minute open discussion.
Oh yeah, I'm excited for this.
I got the timer at 10. Y'all can also refer to the clock in the top right, I noticed, and kind of gauge off that too to keep yourselves on track. But I'll raise my hand at 30 seconds, a minute.
A minute, yeah.
Yeah, I'll raise my hand at a minute. Just let me know when y'all are ready.
Just free to talk.
Absolutely. Someone started. Yep.
Yes. So Elevator, in your rebuttal, you talked about I think you were making an argument about the need for more empirical evidence. And you kind of opened it up with that distinction that this is going to be really hard to talk about because the scope of our empirical data is very, very limited. So we're going to be making a lot of logical inferences here.
Mhm.
Using that faculty of reason to expand our understanding to domains we don't have immediate sense data access to. Could though, with this idea of observing, because we can in a lab, this is my huge rebuttal I have against the whole observing the person and make a decision in a lab, right? And they're going to choose, and then the stimulus hits on their brain. There is a method going on there that is determining the outcome. It's not like, and you kind of brought this up. You're not observing their whole entire life, meaning they're making decisions that are low stakes, very, very low stakes. They're not making a decision of whom they're going to marry. That would be something really interesting. And you're not going to get someone contemplating proposing to a woman, and you're not going to be able to scan their brain scans because they're probably going to consult a lot of different things through that thought process. And it's going to be very hard to differentiate whether that's true. And that's my problem with that experiment is they're low stake decisions. And so what that experiment is doing is they're taking a low stake situation and then they're mistaking the method that they employed, watching the brain scans, picking, and they're exacting that up or making an induction to metaphysics. So they're building a metaphysics of the nature of reality from that simple experiment. But I want to ask, like, with this idea, a naturalistic explanation, could social psychology, now that we are in the 21st century and we can observe mass human behaviors and we can look retrospectively back at history, could that be a good way to observe how people participate or act out particular cultural myths? So we got the communists and they have their cultural myths. And if you understand what is guiding that philosophy, that politics, there is a data point we can use there. Same with fascists, same with capitalism, all these different myths that drive a particular group of people we can now actually observe because we have the data.
So there's a lot to break down there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll start off by saying that is one issue that I have as well with the way that these neuroscience experiments and psychology experiments are run, right? So famously have, and I had to look this up, Leibott's experiment, right? Benjamin Leibott's experiment from 83, where TLDR, he hooks up some EEG to some people and then asks them whether they want to press a button and evaluates the series of electrical signals that lead up to the decision of yes or no, I don't want to press the button. And what he ended up finding was that there is that initial electrical signal, right, saying that the brain is instructing the body about a motor signal, and then you have the conscious rationalization that follows of, oh, I want to press that button or not. So again, yeah, this is a very tiny experiment, right? You would never be able to replicate that study design with something that actually matters. There's a difference between wanting to press a button and then coming up with all of these rationalizations for whether to marry someone or whether to move countries. But I guess if I'm relying on my admittedly flawed human inference, my instinct is that all big decisions are just small decisions stacked on top of each other, right? So is there really that much of a difference between wanting to move countries and wanting to press a button? It's just that there's additional steps. And if we can figure out whether or not there's free will at that very fundamental level, at the pressing the button step, then we can extrapolate and think, okay, well, maybe that means we don't have free will in other domains, even if, they're more serious. So, admittedly, there's limitations there. But it seems like these neuroscience experiments are robust enough that they give us an idea about the mechanical underpinnings of decision making. And I didn't fully understand when you transition into talking about political ideology and how. So, if I understood correctly, were you saying, were you asking whether I believe that there are social psychology experimental methodologies that could parse why people are attracted to certain political ideas?
Oh no, I was asking opening because you were asking for a when I was talking when you're in your rebuttal when I was going on about myths being, you might say, the governing zeitgeist or spirit of a collective group of people. And even in your own life, if you're an alcoholic, you're being governed by a myth, a story that is very hedonistic and impulse gratification. We now have enough data to actually kind of see that you can make an argument that there is a natural explanation that can show you the causal inference of how these myths actually dictate human behavior in almost absurd ways. Why would people commit genocide? Because there is something top down governing in the air shaping them, and there's an argument for the arena shaping the individual to go along with turning your neighbor in to the Stasi, whatnot. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, I believe that from the extrapolations of like these different experiments we've had, or even just like observations about biology, we can make the case that like all of these myths that we use to rule our lives are rooted in some kind of biological or environmental explanation. For some people, it's hedonism. Dopamine go off, serotonin go off. For other people, it might be something else, like loss aversion, let's say, trying to avoid pain. It might be something more complex that we don't actually have, full grasp of, only bits and pieces. But yeah,
so,
I do think this is a very interesting area of study.
With the back to the beginning with that experiment and kind of consulting all the stakes of if you're going to make a decision and it's different in Leibniz experiment based in the real world. When you make a decision whether to propose marriage to someone, or maybe you're going to make a decision, I'm going to flee this country because there's a totalitarian regime, you don't just what you gather. And so what the reason faculty is doing is gathering all the perceptual data. So when you're in an experiment setting, you don't gather all of the perceptual data from your entire life. You don't consult your mother, your father, your country when you're going to push a button. But when you are going to propose marriage, you're going to start consulting your future self. And so you're making all these inferences and you're thinking big. And so this agency that you have, this ability to have free will, is coupled or is accountable to other things, to your country, to your family, to your tribe, to your if you have pets, to your home. All of that is taken into account when you make a high stake decision. And that's an argument, I guess, going against me that free will is a myth because your will, but I think it's true because free will is coupled and tied to a broader arena, and you cannot make decisions independent of that. However, I do think you can change. I think this is where, so I don't think you have agency most of the time. You are dictated by the essence or the spirit or the myth of your family, tribe, community, marriage. You participate in that life. But when you hit rock bottom, so like for an alcoholic, when he hits rock bottom, he hits destruction. Something comes to him and says, "Wake the hell up! You need to get out of this bad myth." What is that thing? And is that the point in that person's life where they're actually making a choice for themselves finally and not being dictated by something oppressive, or if you're going to get out of a bad marriage, where is that point where you say, okay, I'm going to step out and make a sacrifice? And I think that might be a good point to explore. That is where free will actually is found, is
Yeah,
in
it's
that moment.
so yes, I've heard this argument before, and it is appealing. In some ways, this idea that like there are some moments of clarity in people's lives where they shed the myths or like the buildup of data that they've had and just focus on the now and make a decision in the now. Unfortunately, I'm pretty nihilistic about it, so
Yeah.
I I'm similar to determinists in the sense that I believe that there's a cause and effect to all of human behavior. So the alcoholic who decides to stop being an alcoholic only decides that because of things that happened prior, those prior events, those outside influences. And I would argue it's probably the same thing with other behaviors too. The person who decides to leave a bad marriage, the person who decides to not snitch in a totalitarian regime, the person who decides to move to Antarctica, all of these seemingly all of these moments that appear to us as moments of clarity seem to me like they're just cleverly disguised variants on the same thing. So fundamentally, you have the same kinds of like influences that stack up in different ways to create decisions that may not be obvious to us. So the causal chains still exist. It's just that the cause and effect relationship for the alcoholic in the moment is not evident to the alcoholic. Sorry, go on.
That's good.
Great stuff, y'all.
I mean, oh wait, was that everything? Did we get the time?
That's 10
Sorry,
minutes.
I totally
Yeah.
didn't see. Anyway.
It's okay. Good stuff. Let's move to the Q&A part. The first question will be for Elevator, and I'll give you 2 minutes. I'll raise my hand at 30 seconds, unless
Okay.
you're free to just answer it in 10 seconds if you like to. The question is, what real-world example shows people behaving better after believing free will isn't real?
I don't think it's possible for people to believe that free will isn't real. So no examples come to mind. I think I tried to come up with these instances of like, is it even possible to decouple yourself from this idea that you have agency in your own life? I don't think there is. I mean, at least there's no examples I can think of other than maybe anhedonia, like depression, things like that, where you have a pathology that prevents you from really. But even in those cases, right, the anhedonic person or the depressed person fundamentally still acts like they have free will, right? It's just that they feel sad. It's a very difficult thing to parse, to be honest. Yeah, no is the short answer.
Okay. Great. Let me reset the timer. Question is for you, Caden. You have 2 minutes. What is one moment in a choice that isn't shaped by your past or your brain?
That's the question. What is the moment where you have a choice that isn't shaped by your past or your brain?
Yep.
Ooh, okay. Shape is a very interesting word. I'm gonna say there is no moment in life where that isn't the case. Every choice you make is going to be shaped, but can it be overridden? Every decision you are placed with, you have to consult your biology, your nurturing, all of prior experience, and so there is no moment where that isn't a direct influence. However, from my belief system, from my understanding, and I'm stepping out of and I'm stepping into the religious terrain and the transcendent language and the idea of faith. Faith is when you consult a higher principle, a higher where you want to go in life. You might say that is not just not just past causal biology, and you consult that higher order principle, and you teleologically you align your actions to that higher principle. And so when you have faith and you act in accordance, I would say that is the moment where you are stepping outside of your biology, outside of your past upbringing. But it's going to require a sacrifice to make that first step, because you're going to be overriding your arena. You could say your environment, and hopefully the results is your arena will change. Phenomenologically, you will live in a new world. The way life unfolds itself to you, or you'll change the world around you for all those with you, because you were the first brave soul to take a step into the unknown. So it's in those really tense moments where you make that highly highly high stake decision, and you use your reason to do it. There you go.
Awesome. This question will be both of you back to back. Elevator, you'll go first. You have 2 minutes. If your view was proven without a doubt wrong tomorrow, what would change about how people act?
Which part of the view would be my first question? Right back to you, but I can. Are you gonna elaborate, or should I get the?
Your view of thinking that free will is a myth. What if that was proven without a doubt incorrect tomorrow? What do you think people would change? Like, how would they start behaving?
Okay, this is super interesting and also multi-layered. So, I mean, um, as mentioned before, I'm pretty nihilistic about this. I think that it's inevitable that people will create that kind of myth in their head regardless. So part of me is like, well, people are already operating under the assumption of free will. So if free will was proven wrong tomorrow, nothing would change. People would just continue acting as though free will exists, except now they'll have the data to back it up, right? Another part of me would like to think that if free will was proven wrong, sorry, if free will was proven correct and free will is a myth was proven wrong, people would probably feel more empowered and have more agency. We know this from locus of control studies and generally on an anecdotal level, how people operate when they're religious and feel like they are seizing control of their own lives. They tend to be happier. So I'd like to think that if we had some definitive proof that free will existed, people would be better off.
Awesome. 2 minutes to you, Caden. Same question. I'll repeat it. If your view was proven without a doubt wrong tomorrow, what would change about how people act today?
Oh man, I don't think it would change anything. I'm also have a nihilistic undertone with this argument. I don't think most people actually exercise. If there is free will, people don't actually most of the time don't exercise it. That they are automatons based on their environment. And I have a very cynical view that it takes suffering. It takes I need to change my damn life to make something happen. I'm fed up with what's going on, and I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to change it. People actually have to do that, and it's a very, very few humble people actually follow through in that path. Most people just take what comes. Very people want to seize life by the horns in that way. Now, they seize life, but the very few people that do typically tend to be the movers of society, tend to be the atlases of the world, and they tend to bear the world on their shoulders in a sense for their community. I think if you did take that away and decentivize them, what you would have is an evisceration of entrepreneurs and innovators and responsible people in our society. And what you will see happen to society if there is no belief that there is free will, that people can actually change their arena, is you'll have something kind of similar to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, where the society collapses in on itself because all the thinkers of the world are gone and people just become robots and they literally self-destruct. And so I think we have to keep that belief, keep that myth, if it is a myth, alive, because it keeps the world progressing.
Now it's time to go into our closing statements. Elevator, you'll go first. You have 3 minutes. Just let me know when to start the timer.
So, just to summarize, my points. I feel that I've made a case for why free will is a myth. It seems like we largely agree on most of the points that biology and environment, at least to some degree, play a role in every decision we make. I happen to take it a step further where I think that it's that all the way down. But I also believe, perhaps radically, that humans can't change their perception of free will. I thought it was really interesting, actually, with the response to the last question, that I believe nothing would change because I think people already assume that they have free will, and you believe nothing would change because you believe that people don't like they have free will. And I agree with both statements, actually. It's just to different degrees. So, yeah, I mean, free will is another thing we can agree on is that free will, even if it is a myth, is foundational to pretty much everything we do. It underpins our legal systems, our moral systems, our mental health, and yeah, I think that even if I can concede that free will is probably a myth, the actions don't change. The points you made that people should seize control of their own lives, or at the very least pretend like they have some agency in their lives, that will make people feel happier. And it'll make society more productive overall. We might not even be able to internalize that free will is a myth 100%, but it's for sure that people don't take advantage of their belief in free will. Not to the fullest extent, anyway. I think I covered all the points I wanted to cover.
All right, great. Caden, you have 3 minutes. Let me know when to start.
Oh, thank you, Scott, and thank you, Elevator. This has been very enjoyable exploring these ideas, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how much we both agree on many things. It's almost like we come to the same conclusion, but some of our premises are a little different, and it's kind of odd and very interesting. I think what the main point of difference between us is trying to figure out where that turtle of causality, you know, how the argument for God, it's turtles all the way down. We're going with the same thing with will what I'm trying to figure out is where, if there is free will, where does the infinite regress stop? And kind of the argument I was making is it's something to do with when you override, when you choose to transcend, or you choose to sacrifice. The language of sacrifice is in there, where you let your old arena die, or you let your old self die, and you embrace a new life, a new myth. And there's something there. And that might be the point, if you believe in God, where you're going to find God, where you're going to find the closest approximation of what God is probably going to be in that same place, because the free will debates and the God debates, they're kind of intertwined quite often. So, yeah, and I would like to hear that. You said you've heard that argument before about the alcoholics hitting rock bottom. I would love to get that. If you have that on hand, I would love to hear that argument more fully, or read up on that, because it's something I'm reaching towards in my understanding. But to be succinct, yeah, I felt my argument was well explored, well criticized, and I'm really pleased. My points were free will is something we discover, you might say, through sacrifice, through overriding, being a rational man, a rational soul, as Aristotle would put it, and we take account for our environment, for the world we're placed in, and we make it better. We're stewards over it, and we improve it. It is a myth, in the sense that, in my use of the word of myth as sacred story. A sacred story is that narrative structure that animates human behaviors that people participate in, and we can choose, as rational beings, which myth, which governing spirit is going to guide our lives. And so that's kind of the whole of my argument. And and that myth can be helpful. It can lead to life more abundant, or it can be destructive, and it can lead to hell. So I choose to have free will, or believe I have free will, and participate in that myth, because that places the accountability and responsibility of my microcosm, my creation, my life on my shoulders, and I can actually perhaps glean a little bit of heaven on earth from that myth. And that is a core, for my belief, that is a core Christian myth too. So.
All right, great stuff. That concludes the debate. Thank you to both sides for a thoughtful exchange, and thank you to everyone listening. You sat through the whole thing. So ask yourself, did you choose that, or did it just unfold? Hang out for a minute to see a compilation of previous debates and make sure to go check them out.
I would say that our political system is what regulates these morals.
But I mean, if everyone's out there with their morals, and if we shared them, well, somebody's gonna break it eventually.
Change. But we do judge cultures as wrong, and that only makes sense if there's a standard above culture.
If we look at everything happening in the universe, it's all either a result of something random or causal, and therefore it doesn't matter how you kind of look at it and slice it. It is just the same type of things. So
I'm going to say truth has to be objective in order for it to apply to everybody, right?
If you're a Kantian-style deontologist, then it can be a bit contradictory to claim that something is a myth and also helpful.
We actually can make choices that are independent of our determined environment.